So just to recap, I've given you some of the tools that we use, and there are a lot more as well. But a key one is solving channel factors and plan making. So channel factors, again, are these little things that get in the way. It's very important to look at anything that you're doing to figure out where these little barriers might be. Right? And plan making is hugely powerful. Just getting people to decide when, where, and how they're going to do something versus just generally do something makes a big difference. Peer benchmarking, as we saw, social proof, telling people what others are doing, benchmarking, very powerful. Defaults. Any choice we present to people, whether we like it or not, has a default, and that default may be doing nothing. Right? So it's not that imposing some other default is forcing a choice. We are forcing a choice today, which is do nothing in many cases. Commitment devices. So these are things that make it painful to break a commitment. It could be something annoying like the clocky or the glow cap that causes you some embarrassment because it sends an email to your friend, or it could be a penalty of some kind. And choice architectures, thinking about how, when people make choices, when to set up these choices, what the best times are. Okay. So I want to just to bring this together, I want to show you an example that showed up in my inbox, and maybe we can do this one together, right? So this was an email from Citibank, and it said, wouldn't you like to just set up savings as an autopilot? Pretty nice message. I thought, oh wow, they're trying to, get me set up with a default that's good for me, automatic savings. This is great, right? So good idea. They thought about that. Now, if you scroll down, this is what you get. So this is how you have to do it. Right, so anyone have any thoughts on, will this work? Right? I mean, it's just horribly painful, right? So they thought about defaults. They thought about, oh, people don't think about saving, so let's make it automatic. But this is where they failed. Right? You have to do a lot of confusing stuff in order to do this. If there was just a button that said set up automatic savings that I clicked and it set up some small default amount at a monthly frequency, a lot of people would probably do it and then maybe later change it. Right? So a lot of designs like this are starting to think about behavioral economics, but they miss something. Right, so this is not about taking that one tool and applying it really well. It's about all of it. Right, all it takes is one of these little barriers to trip you up. So that's the key thought I want to leave you with, is that this is about thinking through everything, the whole process holistically. What are all of the things that get in the way? What are the different psychologies? So let me end with that. I'm going to take some questions and then I have a final thought for you that I'll close with.
Thanks very much. On the impulsive saving, actually there is an example and a recommendation from Ogilvy. And an Australian bank has created an iPhone app with a big red button.
Great.
And so just the way you do impulsive buying,
yeah,
it's impulsive
savings.
So you're sitting, you're bored, you're having a cup of coffee, and you hit the button. $5 goes into your savings.
Nice. That's great.
Impulsive buy. The question I was going to ask you is, coming up to elections here, a lot of the choice architecture, a lot of the defaults that you showed, for example, Cass Sunstein's book, Cass Sunstein has gone to the Obama administration. Right. The opposition has called him a choice Nazi. that the notion of both in the UK and US of using choice architecture for paternalistic, sort of we know what's good for the choices are going to come under huge attacks in a political arena. How do you think they will fare, given that usually irrationality and emotion trumps rational? Yeah,
it's ironic, right? It's the same problems that the behavioral economists are trying to solve now get in their way. Yeah, that I've already heard that from a lot of people, especially in the policy circle, like, oh, aren't you just trying to, tell people they're stupid and they need protection? it's going to be hard. That's an argument that comes up. A lot of people believe it. And it's examples like the 401k where people don't cancel, even on the default, help. So they help create the evidence. This is not something that we're paternalistically forcing on people. We're just changing the way the choice is made. I think the key thing that'll help is realizing that if you don't do that, there is some default there already. So by not choosing. Yeah, so just going out and framing this whole issue in terms of what are today's defaults and are they the right defaults is very different from saying, what choice should people make? Right? Because as soon as you start laying out what today's defaults are, I think most people will agree, oh, they're pretty bad. Yeah. Oh, there's one here.
Yeah, I still have another marshmallow question. I was thinking, if the kids were left in that room for 5 minutes, to what extent would, whether or not the marshmallow will change? And I guess I'm thinking in terms particularly of health. What is the time factor when we're talking about long-term benefits for health? The difference between a tetanus shot and eating calcium, having calcium for bones.
Yeah.
What is the role of time in when you can make a good intervention, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, now time is, the longer you go, the worse it gets, although the good news is that it doesn't continually get worse forever. I mean, once you're kind of I don't know, I don't think anybody's quantified this perfectly, people try, but once you're a few months to a year out, a year versus 10 years doesn't make a huge difference. People are very, very short-term focused. It's all about instant gratification, and that's where automaticity or making some of these decisions automatic comes in. So you can, with education and information, you can create an intention to do something, right? But if that action involves, you have to actively go and buy some insurance tomorrow, or you have to each month put some money into your savings account, and you have to do it manually. That's where a lot of these programs fail, because people may do it once, maybe twice, maybe 3 times, and then they drop off. So at the time when you've given them the education and information is when they're ready to make the decision. Not even 5 minutes later, literally at that moment. So if you have a way for them to make a decision, sign up for a program that is then going to just automatically work and help, that is kind of the one way we found of solving this problem. The other is reminders and social proof and so on.
Thanks. You've talked a lot about people making null choices if you give them too many. Is there a role for curiosity on the other side of the equation? When you put obstacles in people's way to finding something out deliberately, is there any research that shows that people become fascinated by that and seek the information actively because you've hidden it from them?
Right. So we, just for fun, we sent out postcards that said, "Don't call this number," and there was a phone number on it. And to be particularly cruel, we made it even funnier. The call went to an automatic, voicemail box. And we only sent the cards to people called Aaron or Aaron. And when they called in, the voicemail said, "Hello, Aaron. Thank you for calling. Please tell us why you called." And the response rate on this thing was 7%. Right? So I think there's something to curiosity. Now that said, we did not do a control because this was a fun. So we didn't do a control that said, "Please call this number." But I think someday we will do that because there is something to that. Yeah, people are curious by nature.
Hi there. So we at Ogilvy spend a lot of time trying to understand our audiences and understand the differences between different audience segments. And what you're saying here is that there's these rules, kind of general population rules. Are there any gender differences that are relevant in this discussion, or ethnic, racial differences that you can share with us?
Sure. Yeah, this is a tough one because so many of us, and myself included, come from a background of thinking about segments and personality differences and cultural differences. All of the psychology research says that the situation or context that you put people in, rather, has a lot more impact than their culture, personality, gender, anything else. Now, that's not to say those things don't matter, but they matter very little if the situation is powerful enough. So my answer would be that think about the situation and the context first, and then these gender and personality differences. And those differences in the context of how people perceive the situation, I think that's usually the mechanism. So say a woman may perceive the same message or same situation differently than a man, and that might change the effect. So it's more fine-tuning versus the first tool that you go for.
Hi. Can you talk a little bit about the differences between choices that people might have to make once a year or once in a lifetime, like organ donation, versus choices that we want people to make every day or 3 times a day, or like eating healthy at every meal? How does this apply to those situations?
Right. So there are a couple of things. One is the infrequent choices are in a way harder because you don't have this opportunity to learn or form a habit. Right? With everyday choices, frequent choices, you can eventually form a habit. And people get better. Right? People do learn. They don't learn by sitting in lectures. They learn by doing the same thing over and over again. So you can form a habit, so that helps you with the everyday choices. But then it also presents a challenge because you're starting out with some other habit that you need to replace. So how do you replace that other habit? Right? And some of the research that's coming out on behavior change says that habits are triggered by things that you see, things in your environment. So there's a project we're working on where we're trying to get people to not go to the branch to pay their bills, to try to use online banking. And this is a habit problem. Everything about the branch is familiar, you know how to do it, you go in there, it all looks the same. So what we're going to try is we're going to change the flow of the branch. Right? So we'll change what happens when you go to the teller, we'll move the self-service kiosks to a different place, we'll change the lines, and we'll see if that breaks people out of the habit. And what that'll do is it won't break people out of the habit right away, but it'll force them to look at other options. Once they start doing the other thing, eventually that habit will form. Okay?
Hi. So a lot of the examples that you shared today are kind of activating someone to engage in something or setting the default option for someone to stay in something. And I think as you started to talk a little bit about breaking habits, maybe you're touching on this, but I was wondering how you apply this concept to kind of cessation of, smoking cessation or drug prevention, where what you're trying to motivate is not engaging in something.
Right. Yeah, so it's the bill payment example was one way to break habits. With smoking, I'm trying to recall, there's a self-commitment type device that people have used. So, you have an intention to quit all the time, but you just have a hard time doing it. So how do you make that into a commitment? Now, if you were able to, say, go and put yourself on a list so that you couldn't buy cigarettes anymore. Right, so you can take some sort of action when you have the intention that then prevents you from engaging in the temptation later. Right, that's one way to do it. Now that's often very difficult to implement, of course. The social proofs, like in the glow caps case where the thing sends a report to your friends and family, that works pretty well because people are, the pain of embarrassment is often more than the temptation, so that works pretty well. But yeah, that's a tough one. There are always new ideas kind of coming up for that.